Okay. Well, I'd say, with no further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Thank you guys so much for coming this evening. My name is Angela Cummings. I am the executive director of our AFSP Illinois chapter, and I am here really in a supporting role tonight. This series, Unplugged with AFSP Illinois, is put on by our DEI committee, and it's our DEI committee that's going to be running this event tonight, leading the discussion. They planned the questions. They were able to get the panelists for us. So a big thank you to our DEI committee for continuing this important work. I will be monitoring the chat and Q&A in case anything comes up. Just to remind you, we've all been doing this for a couple of years, but just to remind you, you are participating in a webinar. It means that your video and your audio are not, we can't see those, they're not shared with anybody. So you should throw any questions that you have maybe into the Q&A. I will try to utilize the chat primarily for posting any links that I think might be helpful to you, or if something got missed and I need to kind of follow up and be like, what they said was, this is the URL for this or whatever. So anyway, having said that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video. I'm going to stop my microphone, and I'm going to pass it over to Beth Morrison, who is our AFSP Illinois board president. And she is actually going to be leading this discussion this evening. So take it away, Beth, and thank you, panelists. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Angela. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. As Angela said, my name is Beth Morrison, and I do serve on the board of directors for AFSPIL. I'm also a member of their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, along with Dimple, Ann, and Edmund, who are all joining us tonight as well. I also was the founder and coordinator of the Campus Suicide Prevention Program, Salukis on Your Side, at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. And as part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, we are passionate towards increasing awareness, representation, and fairness to create a safe and welcoming space to foster change and better reflect the communities that we serve. So on behalf of AFSPIL, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, we thank you for joining us this evening and being part of this discussion. So I would like to now just start by introducing our panelists, who we are very happy to have with us. So I'm going to start with Sue. Sue Cohn, would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Sure. My name's Sue Cohn, and I have been working with AFSP for about 18 or 19 years. I volunteer a lot at the walk, so if any of you have been to the walks, I may have registered you. I also participate in the International Suicide Loss Survivor Day every year on the panels there and helping out. And my husband died 19 years ago by suicide. And I started volunteering, or actually I took my kids to Willow House's suicide survivor support group, and then later became a facilitator. And I work with the kids who have had a loved one die by suicide. So,
thank you so much, Sue. And we do appreciate you being here this evening. And now we will go to Ankur Varma, if you'd like to introduce yourself and say a few words.
Hi, yeah, thank you. My name is Ankur Varma. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in Chicago, and I've been working as a therapist, as a clinical supervisor, and as a trainer in this field for 10 years. And working with a diverse array of clients around difficulty with suicidality, self-harm, as well as family issues and socioeconomic issues. And so this is a topic that's dear to me as well, and something that's important in my personal and professional life. So I'm excited to have this conversation and share any knowledge that I can.
Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. And then I'm going to go to Dr. Edmund Yomtov.
Thank you. You pronounced that correctly. I appreciate that. My name is... There was a tutorial before the webinar began. My name is Dr. Edmund Yomtov. I'm a psychologist and survivor of suicide loss myself. My mother died by suicide over 30 years ago. I am I'd like to say that I'm one of the founding members of this chapter. And after about a 8 or 9 year, maybe even 10-year hiatus, I am returning to the board of directors. I've worked on the national level, working on the Loss and Healing Council. I was one of the founding members of the LGBT plus task force. And I teach people how to run grief support groups through AFSP, which is one of my favorite things to do.
Oh, that's wonderful. And as you can see, we do have a lot of experience. We have folks with lived experience on the panel. So again, I'm so happy that you were able to join us this evening. And if any of the folks attending, if you have any questions for the panelists, please go ahead and type them out in the chat. We will answer as we can, and we'll follow up with you if we did not get to your question. We will be saving the questions for the end as well. So we do know that the holidays are often a time of joy and celebration with family and friends, but for most of us, we also experience increased stress. And for some of us, we experience what has been described as like holiday blues, where we may feel a sense of dread and want to avoid the holidays altogether. So I am very happy that we're able to come together this evening to discuss this important topic and maybe bring some hope and help for this holiday season. So I just wanted to start with some general questions. About the holidays and managing mental health. So, what are some of the signs to watch out for in someone who might be struggling more around the holidays? And this can be for anyone who wants to jump in.
So one of the things that I try to keep in mind are kind of three components of health, which are sleep, diet, and exercise. So when I'm looking at sleep, sometimes we're looking at increased sleep or more difficulty with sleep, maybe due to anxiety or increased stress. In terms of diet, that includes, increased appetite, decreased appetite, or even increased alcohol use or substance use of some sort. And then exercise includes any sort of physical activity. So if somebody is feeling more lethargic or using exercise in a different way or physical activity in a different way, those can kind of be some of the central signs of or central areas that we might look at in terms of gauging how somebody's managing their mental health as well.
So with that, are there certain signs or behaviors we should watch out for in youth as well, who might be struggling more or experiencing increased symptoms around this time? Anything that we should be noticing with youth?
Sure, I'll jump in with this one. And this isn't necessarily unique to youth. I think we need to take a look at a mood, how people are presenting, whether they're expressing some kind of depression or sadness or anxiety. With youth, that tends to show up like irritability and crankiness. The other couple things that I would pay attention to is whether or not a person is engaged in their world as they typically are. Are they going to school? Are they working? Are they spending time with friends the way they typically are? Or are we noticing a little bit more social isolation and withdrawal? And then the final thing that I would pay attention to on this one is energy level. This is a time, especially with the shortened lengths of days, that again, not only with youth, but with adults, that a lot of people with the shorter length of days experience seasonal affective disorder, which has a lot to do with the length of day and how much sun exposure we get, which gives us vitamin D. And we could talk a little bit more about seasonal affective disorder a little bit more if you like.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you brought that up because we do often hear about seasonal affective disorder or SAD around this time of year. And also along with that, I hear this term, holiday blues and some of the things that you mentioned, like increased lethargy, maybe changes in appetite or sleep habits. What is the difference between having like the holiday blues, for instance, and a mental illness like SAD or seasonal affective disorder or even depression? What would be the difference?
Well, I think, when we think about mental illness, to build off of what Edmund was sharing, we're thinking about functionality, right? And how it's impacted in different environments, whether it's school, work, in your social environments, and the family. And so, and also time frame, right? So holiday blues might be related more to that temporary stress or strain that we feel, especially given that, not only are the seasons changing, but also the schedule is changing, right? We have more days off or less of a routine that we're able to stick to around this time. Whereas with mental illness, that might not be so tied to a time of year or a specific day or custom, right? Whereas we're looking at this over a longer period of time and really impacting different parts of your life.
I would also,
And so are you, oh,
you
go,
know,
go ahead, Edmund, please.
I would also pay attention to what people are saying. Somebody is saying, "Oh, I usually love the holidays, but this year I don't have it in me." And then we might see something more like a mental health problem. And in that case, you would want to refer a person to a mental health professional who can go through the diagnostic symptoms of anxiety, depression, or something else. Or if somebody's saying, "Listen, as a person who was raised Jewish for a very long time, I don't know if I'd call it the holiday blues, but I was just like, this isn't my holiday." Right. And so some people are experiencing, and I think when we need to think about the holiday blues, we need to talk about number one, which holiday, because in about 3 weeks, we have Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and New Year's Eve. What those holidays mean to people. And if you're a person, for the most part, when we talk about the holidays, most people are talking about Christmas. And for those who don't celebrate Christmas, it's got a very different meaning for us. And for those people who do celebrate Christmas, it has different meaning for people who do celebrate Christmas. For some people, it's all about getting great gifts, right? And for other people, it's a very spiritual, religious thing. And for other people, it's just about spending time with family. But going back to your question, listen to what people have to say about what's going on with them is one of the ways you could tell the difference between a mental health disorder and what we'll call the holiday blues.
Yeah, so it sounds like listening and really trying to understand what they're saying and what it is exactly that might be triggering for them or creating more additional stress. Very, very good points. I like that. I like that idea of listening and asking, or if you notice that there's a difference in mood or change in behavior, asking what's going on for them. I like that. And also, Edmund, you bring up another interesting topic with, being mindful of cultural differences during the holidays. What are some ways that we can be more mindful of cultural differences during this time?
Well, one of the things I like to do, and I don't know that this is necessarily related to the holiday blues or depression or anxiety, is I tend to ask people, what holiday do you celebrate? And if somebody says Christmas, I'll wish them a Merry Christmas. Or somebody says they don't celebrate anything, I'll just say, well, I hope you have a wonderful winter. Or, I hope that you don't stay too cold, or you're able to stay warm or something like that. But I like to talk to people about where they're at and what this time of the year means to them.
Wonderful. Would the other two of you, would you like to add anything to that? Anything any tips on how to be more mindful of the cultural differences or what folks might be going through?
Yeah, I think about, in terms of kind of reaching across cultures or understanding somebody else's cultural background or upbringing is, increasing awareness, as Edmund was talking about in terms of asking them about, what do they celebrate if they do celebrate and learning. Right. Having a natural curiosity about what's important to them. Right. just because two people celebrate Christmas or Diwali or Hanukkah doesn't mean that they celebrate it in the same way or have the same customs. And so it's important to even, even if you think that you know a little bit about that, to learn a little bit more from that individual's perspective. And just a personal story really quickly is, I have a coworker, actually my boss, who grew up not celebrating holidays. So for her, the holidays do bring out a sense of blues, in the sense that, as a child, she always had to sit to the side, quite literally, during holiday celebrations or parties, because of her upbringing. And so sometimes it's just important to recognize, that somebody was, brought up differently, and that's completely okay, but to also be sensitive to what their background is.
And I'll just add that something that my daughter taught me, I love when I learn from my kids, and this is about 9 years ago. There's an app called Nextdoor, and you can get to know your community. And she invited people over to celebrate Shabbat. She invited people over to have Hanukkah at her house. And in exchange, they invited her to their celebrations that they were having. So along with the curiosity that Edmund talked about, I think it'd be really wonderful, and I've done it as well, is to share other people's holidays, and then you can understand what at least that one family does for that holiday.
I love that. And what a great way to get to know your neighbors and to create and develop a sense of community. I love that. And also, I think too, like you said, Sue, learning about traditions from other cultures and other holidays that they might celebrate. I think, it gives us an opportunity to learn more about the people that we are working with or that we are living around, and have that sense of community. Wonderful. But also, there was, I believe it was Encore who brought up the coworker who was alone at Christmas or at the holidays. And that can, the holidays can kind of heighten our feelings of loss, sadness, if we've gone through the loss of someone close to us, or if we're grieving around the holidays. How can we help someone to manage that grief, or how can we manage our own grief if we're feeling alone or feeling kind of isolated during the holidays?
I think one way is, if we know that somebody has had a recent loss, even if it's in the whole last year, to check in with them to say, hey, what are you feeling like you're up to this holiday season? Would you like to join us? Would you like us to X, Y, or Z, to see what they want, because no two grieving people, just like no two any other thing, are going to feel the same way. One thing that I personally do around the holidays, or any anniversary of, my husband's death or his birthday or our anniversary, I always proactively make a plan ahead of time, like 6 months ahead of time or a month ahead of time, so that during that exact day or time that I don't feel sad or, something like that. So I find a person that I can be with that I know could sit with me if I do feel sad, or that will have fun with me if that's how I'm feeling that day. So that's what I do.
I really like that. Thank you for that. And I think a few things that you touched on, just this, idea that it's okay for us to set limits, and it's okay for us to plan ahead and to let people know where we're at during, these celebrations. And if we need to limit, who we're around and for how long we're around someone, or what activities we participate in, it's okay. And just letting, ourselves know that it is okay for us to say, no, I'm not up to this right now, or this is how I plan to spend my holidays this year. And I think, for many people, there are different stages that they're in of their grief. So just like you said, to ask and to get to know, what that person is going through. Very important. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. So you said something really important there, right? That no two grieving people are alike, right? And especially if you're within the same family and you're grieving, the loss of somebody that you share, right? You're gonna see two different ways of remembering that person during that time or honoring that person, and so that's okay as well, right? To just remember that. One person might be fondly remembering them or laughing about a memory that they had with them, whereas somebody else might be, grieving more through sadness or another method, and that's okay, right? To give each person that individual space to grieve in their own way, and each of those ways is completely acceptable.
Great. And I have been looking at some research, and there was a NAMI study that came out, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, that showed that 64% of people with mental illness report that holidays actually make their conditions worse. What are some ways to reduce stress and maintain good mental health during the holiday season? If you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed and feeling, intense grief or loss, what are some good strategies or good coping mechanisms that you all could share?
My favorite coping mechanism is learning to say, no, I won't do that. I think that this time of the year evokes um, so much for a lot of people, and a sense that they need to make the holiday look like a certain thing, or it needs to be a certain way, and the food needs to be absolutely perfect, and you have to buy the absolute right gifts for everybody. And that's just a lot of pressure. And a lot of the times this aim for perfection really gets in the way of just having a good time. So learning to say no, learning to recognize that, things just don't have to be perfect.
Yes, I like that. I like that idea of saying no, and how freeing that can be when you actually can say no to some things and set boundaries. Sue, what about you? What are some coping mechanisms that you would like to share that have been helpful for you?
Yeah, the very first one is boundaries. Because you or I'm the only person that knows what I need. And if I don't share that with my friends, my family, my enemies, whatever, they don't even have a chance to support me the way that I need to be supported. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And Encore, what about you?
Yeah, and I love what both of you said about this, and I think for me, also personal boundaries are important. So maintaining as much routine as we can, our habits that keep us healthy day to day, right? Because I know, if you're celebrating the holidays, right, we're staying up later, we're eating more, or we're eating at different times than we're used to, or maybe going away from our exercise or our physical routines. We're not going to work as often, so we're around family or friends a little bit more often. And so, those routines that keep us healthy day to day that we might not even think about, those habits that we have, sometimes go out the window a little bit. And so maintaining those as much as possible. And, Sue, you said earlier about something else, kind of planning in advance about that. I think that's a big part of this as well, is to plan, when you're going to be off, what are you going to do? Not just to give and to please others, but to maintain your own habits and your own wellness.
I like that. And yes, I think maintaining routines is very important. And I think, like Edmund said, sometimes we tend to be so busy, and so we feel so much pressure during the holidays, and that can create, added layers of stress. And for someone who is already struggling maybe with grief and loss or mental illness, I know this time of year, I have seen in my own practice, and I'm sure you all have as well, increases in referrals and increases in folks trying to seek help and, trying to get some support. And we know that there's been waiting lists as well. So what would you say to someone who's being referred and they're, I'm being told that there's waiting lists? What are some other strategies or things they can do while they're waiting to be seen? Any suggestions or thoughts on that?
I think there's some meditation apps and some things that can kind of hold, yeah, that exactly, the Calm app. Thank you. I couldn't think of the name of it. Perfect info. Yeah, so that's exactly it. There's every day they have new things that they put on there. So it doesn't matter when you start, you're always gonna be able to possibly, get something from it.
Great. Yes. So there are apps available for mindfulness. And what about, I see a lot. Yes, Sue, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you have a particular friend or family member, that could also be a friend, is that really gets your grief and maybe has been on the journey with you, whether it's been a week or a year or 20 years, maybe make a couple appointments with them, whether it be a phone appointment, a tea appointment, a card game appointment, whatever, to kind of help you, through the season, so to speak.
Yeah, like a support person that you regularly have contact with. Oh, I like that. That's really good.
Well,
Any other suggestions?
sure, I'm going to jump in as well. And I think Ankar talked about this earlier. Self-care is something that virtually any therapist is going to start you out on, right? They're going to say, you need to start taking care of yourself. And self-care isn't something you should just do for the month or one day, like on Christmas, if you don't celebrate it, or if you do celebrate it and you don't want to be with your family. Self-care is a lifestyle, and self-care is a lifestyle that you should be participating in 12 months of a year, 365 days a year. And then you might need to keep a little bit more on around these holidays if they're particularly stressful. And so, that includes and isn't limited to meditation, making sure you're spending time with the right people and not spending time with the wrong people. Because if there are people who are just really unhealthy for you, you do your best not to spend that much time with them. But I think that one of the things we could really talk about is, self-care as a lifestyle and not just a one-time thing.
I really like that term. Self-care is a lifestyle. And, often I just remember hearing people, just go through the same, I think like the same script. We need to start walking more. You need to start eating healthier. Well, for some people, walking may not be their thing. They may prefer to go ride a bike, or they may prefer swimming. So I often think, self-care, yes, it's important to find out what that is specific to the individual and what, self-care strategies can be individualized for that person. So I really enjoy that idea of self-care and having that be a focus during this time and not kind of letting it go by the wayside, that it needs to be a priority, prioritizing self-care, I guess. Any other coping strategies for, if there are, I often wonder too about, some self-help groups or support groups, whether they be online, while you're waiting to maybe see a therapist or see someone. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I think we spend a lot of time thinking about how sometimes social media or the internet can be damaging to our mental health, but now more than ever we have access to information, and as a clinician, my hope is that the information we have, that we learn, is something that everybody eventually has and learns, and embodies, right? And to Edmund's point about self-care being a lifestyle, not okay, I'm going to get a massage and then never do anything like that again. incorporating those habits that are healthy. One of the first things I ask a new client is, what's something that you used to do in your childhood that you enjoyed, but maybe haven't done since then, right? And so going back to those things that brought us joy, at those points in our life where, we didn't maybe have the stressors that we have now, and revisiting some of those activities or exploring something new that, a lot of times we think of depression as kind of narrowing, or anxiety as narrowing our thinking and our creativity. And so, just doing something creative or kind of out of the box can sometimes help, shake things up a little bit, especially when you kind of get into those routines that don't feel so healthy.
Great. And you brought up social media, and it just made me think too that so much on social media and talking about expectations and what we should be doing for the holidays, or the things that we would like to have for the holidays. And for those who maybe can't afford these things, or for those who are struggling to find a means for, to be able to afford counseling, or those supports, what could you speak to on that, these socioeconomic status or some of these other differences that can really impact what a person is able to do in terms of, trying to get help?
Yeah, so I think, going back to those resources through, organizations like NAMI, or through, I think a lot of times we think that, mental health care is inherently going to be expensive. And then sometimes we talk about, in my work, I work a lot with people who are on Medicaid and maybe have, generally have lots of other stressors. And so maybe their resources, their lack of resources is more time rather than money, because they can find those resources through Medicaid, for example. So, sometimes it's being able to just ask for help in general, or to know where to ask for help. And so there are organizations that can guide you, and again, using the internet for things that are actually going to provide you with those resources, or be able to ask you for help. And I've had clients who have told me, I learned about this thing on a message board on Reddit, or on Instagram. And so that's just so refreshing to hear that there are now those resources kind of infiltrating social media, where we thought it was more surface level or superficial.
Right, right. And I think too, you're right, like talking to a provider, or just making that initial phone call and then asking what the options are, if maybe there is a sliding fee scale, or if there are a support group or something that might be a lower fee, or what insurance they have that might be accepted. So yes, I think you're right. Just asking those questions and taking that first step, which can sometimes be challenging as well, just to take that initial step to make that call. Any other comments on that before we move on? So then, we've talked quite a bit about grief and loss and mental illness and stress. But if someone was in actual crisis, or in need, of immediate assistance or help, what can they do? What are some things that they can do in the immediacy if things, did become unbearable, or if there was someone who was having suicidal thoughts? What are some things that they could do?
Well, everybody should be aware of the fact that the National Suicide Prevention Hotline has opened the 988 channel. So it used to be this really long phone number that you had to memorize, and I would tell people, just Google the word suicide, it'll come up on the banner head. It's a 1-800 number. Now, if you're feeling like you're at risk for suicide, or if you care about somebody who you think might be at risk for suicide, you could just pick up your phone and dial 988. I believe you can also use that as a chat function. And it's a great way of being able to reach out, make a connection. If I was concerned about somebody who is suicidal, I'd make the phone call with them.
Very helpful, because yeah, sometimes that just the idea of having to make that call, but if somebody was there with you, it wouldn't seem so scary, probably. And there is a chat line, you're right. And I know also for LGBTQ youth up to the age of 25, there is the Trevor Project. So yeah, so just having that knowledge and being aware that these resources do exist is really important, especially if, you know, not only for ourselves, but if we do start talking to someone and they start making, you know, comments, or that they are thinking about hurting themselves or harming themselves, or suicide, then so that we would have those on hand and know what to do. And I think, like you said, staying with that person and making sure that they are safe is good. Any other comments? Any other thoughts on that?
I'll just add that,
So
I
I
think
do.
some people have just responded well to now, there's this intimidation factor nowadays about even picking up the phone and talking to somebody. So, those text lines and those chats that have been mentioned too are really valuable to know. It's not coming to mind. There's a number that you can text. I'm not sure if somebody can find that, but that's one that I've shared with clients as well to reach out to, especially younger clients who are not so used to talking to somebody over the phone. Yes, there it is, 741-741.
741. Yep. Yep. And it is nice to know that they are 24/7. So there, and I believe we are going to be posting the resources at the end as well. But I think, these are what we're talking about this evening. These are tough things, and these are challenging things to talk about. And I think, when we think of the holidays, like I said at the beginning, a lot of times we're thinking of happy things, and it's a time of celebration. But for many, it isn't. And I know that there's been a myth about the holidays, that suicide, that there are actually more suicides around the holidays. But that actually has been found out to be more of a myth. That the holidays don't actually make the suicidal thoughts suddenly appear. But I think what happens too is that, like we talked about this, sometimes people, they might not have family to be around at the holidays, or they might be feeling very alone, or, they might be struggling with depression. And so I think a combination of these things sometimes happens. And for those who are feeling suicidal, I think it is definitely something that we need to take seriously and have that, although it may be difficult, but have that serious conversation, even though it may be something we're, kind of not wanting to have. But I think it's so important for those who may be struggling, just to know that someone is watching, and someone is aware, and someone is listening. So for I think for youth especially, a lot of times our youth are, and I'm saying this because I worked at SIU for some time, but we would have college students who didn't want to go home for the holidays because their home environment wasn't healthy for them, or it just, they knew that it was going to create a lot of hostility or animosity, but yet they felt like they were forced to go home, or forced to be around family. What would you say to youth who might be in a situation where they're told, no, you have to go? How can they get through some of those challenging situations?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. We've talked about boundaries. For youth, it's harder to set boundaries, right? Because they're, generally under the guidance of their caregivers. And so to, maybe to help them develop a plan around how they might, find those small ways of setting boundaries, and still being able to do the things that they enjoy. Especially you're talking about a college campus, and, that's where a lot of times youth develop good connections with other people, and when they have to leave that environment and go back to an environment that they don't maybe feel as safe, it's important to create some sort of a safety plan with them in terms of how to manage that increased stress, maybe from being around family, or having to socialize in a way that maybe they don't feel so comfortable.
I like that idea of a safety plan. I think that would be very helpful. Or maybe, yes, like how they can limit their time or something that they can do to kind of self-protect while they're there. Any other comments, any other suggestions?
Sure, just because somebody is, with the example you've given, Beth, a youth who has to return home from college because there's no place for them to stay in the dorm, just because they're at home doesn't mean they have to be disconnected. Our connections are as close as the closest phone or laptop, and they should stay in touch with the support system they have at college or elsewhere, just by picking up a phone, calling, texting, sending somebody a Snapchat or a message on TikTok or whatever. That connection isn't always face to face. It can be quite virtual, and that can be really meaningful connection as well.
I like that. And it just brings me back to something that Sue said earlier on about planning ahead. So even, yeah, so planning ahead for, what their strategies and then creating a safety plan, and while they're home, who they can stay connected to, who they can have as a support system while they're at home. Yes, who they can talk to, who they can text with, who they can video chat with. That is supportive, I think is a great plan. Thank you for that. Very good. Very good suggestions. Any other comments on that?
And actually, just to what Edmund said, for parents out there, I think that's an important thing to remember. Previous generations think about the phone as a privilege or as something that's extra, but that is the way that our youth stay connected to their friends and to people who they can be their true selves with, right? It's easier now to connect with people who you really identify with and who really get you, and you can really take your masks off with them. And so things like taking away the phone so that they can be with the family can sometimes be damaging. So just having conversation around that in terms of how you're going to stay connected with friends and also be engaged with family, if that's the goal overall.
Great. And I think too, like we talked about earlier, just having resources and knowing like maybe what support groups are going to be around in your area or what other avenues. I know here in Southern Illinois, we have a Rainbow Cafe, and they're putting on Queermas this December for LGBTQ students. So just knowing, I think, what's available in your community can be so helpful, and so that they have an outlet if they need to, or so that they can go somewhere where they do feel they can be themselves and where they feel like they fit in or where they belong. So important. And that does bring up, so kind of going back to this idea about, the holidays and celebrations that happen right, during December and that, but, there are holidays and celebrations that happen throughout the year, but they don't get the same attention or the same kind of attention that the holidays at the end of the year seem to. So what are some tips for holding more inclusive year-end events? I know that Sue had talked earlier about neighbors and kind of getting together, but what about like for folks who are working in the workplace and there seem to be all these holiday parties? What are some things that employers or that we can do in the workplace to hold more inclusive year-end events? Any ideas?
Well, I think that it would be really cool I just thought of it, to have everybody bring something they could be the winter holidays, or it could be any holiday of the year, and maybe not necessarily like a science fair, but maybe you're standing behind your food and then you take turns going around and explain to people what the food is or what the activity is that you're doing and some of the traditions that you celebrate. It'd be pretty cool.
I like that idea. Yes. Wow. And man, that would be a lot of good food too.
Yeah, please invite me when you throw that
Yes.
party. I'm definitely down for that.
Yeah, that
But
sounds amazing.
I think it's, end of the year is a good time for reflection over the entire year. And so, if you're going to have as an employer, as an organization, if you're going to have a end of the year type of party, then I think you can use that as a chance to reflect on the whole year. So if you want, employees or members of your organization to share customs or just anything that has happened that year that's important to them, you can make it more inclusive by kind of leaving it broader and leaving it up to interpretation, rather having to be relating to, the end of the year type of holidays. And food is a great way to share culture, but activity, things like that also that don't require you to maybe spend a lot of money to bring something for everybody, so that you are keeping everybody included, regardless of income or resources.
Yeah, and I think too, even for us, when in many places that I've worked, being mindful of decorations, of songs that are playing, of parties that you're having, are they just tailored to one group of people or are they inclusive? So just knowing who your workforce is, and what a better way than asking, and having that, like Sue said before, the planning and pre-planning and getting to know who you're working with. And what a great way to start a new tradition, maybe by having different, food from different cultures and that. Great. Any other suggestions or comments? Well, I do want to be mindful of time, and so I thought now would be a good time to open it up to other questions from our audience, and anyone who's been listening, if there's any questions that you have, please put them in the chat, or we'll try to get to them. Let me see. So there is a question that I see. What to do if you're worried about someone, like what to say, or how do you start to ask if someone's okay, if you're suspecting maybe that they're not doing well? What would be a way to maybe bring that up, or how would you start that question?
I think it's always good to lead with, I've noticed, whatever behavior that's leading you there, and say, I'm concerned about you. I want to make sure you're okay. I'm not sure if the question was specifically related to mental health problems or suicide, but you could always just follow up by asking a really direct question. So, I've noticed that, you seem a little down and don't have a lot of energy. First part, I'm concerned for you. And then you ask a question. Do you think you might be depressed? Or do you think is there something going on? Would you like to talk about it? Or even, and asking the direct question, are you thinking about killing yourself? Don't use a euphemism. Be as direct as you can. And if they say yes, you need to work on getting them at a place where they could speak with somebody like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 988. It might not be imminent, right? That person may not need to go to the emergency room, but they might be just kind of going, yeah, I'm really kind of sad and I think about it, but I'm not going to do it. Well, then let's talk about things we could do when a person does have a mental health problem. Maybe you should see a therapist. Maybe you could speak to your medical doctor about possible medications to help you with this. Maybe we can go find you a support group. Maybe we can increase the support around you in other ways. Maybe we can engage in self-care in other ways. But it's not only, you're not the only person responsible for that, right? The person who you're talking to is responsible for it, and their community. So make it a wider question. If they say, yeah, I'm really depressed, well, let's find people who know to talk about depression, or if similarly, if they say, yeah, I'm suicidal, well, let's talk to people who know what to do if a person is suicidal. Let's call this number together. Why don't you put it on speakerphone and I'll just listen? That's one of the things I really encourage people to do, because asking that question is really scary, right? So,
Yes. Yeah, I think that can be one of the hardest parts is for that person to get the courage to even ask the other person, are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you thinking about killing yourself? That can be really challenging, but I think it's so much more sometimes our own fear and our own unwillingness rather than the person who might actually feel relieved that somebody noticed and somebody thought to ask that question. And now, wow, I can finally get this load off. I can finally start talking about it. So yeah, just being able to ask and then knowing exactly like what those resources are, very important, and knowing that there is 988 and there are those chat lines and that there is help available can all bring such, a sense of hope. So thank
Well,
you for
yes,
that. Any other thoughts?
I just wanted to bounce off of one thing you said. I've been in this field for 30 years and I've asked that question more than typical people do, unless you're a professional. Once in 30 years was a person upset with me asking that question. For the most part, like you said, people are relieved, they're grateful, they actually appreciate the concern that goes into asking that question. So the concern that somebody will be mad by you asking is one that you could probably put aside. Just make sure it comes from the heart. I care about you. I want to make sure you're okay.
Yes, and I think that is extremely important, just letting them know that it comes from a place of care, love, and concern. Yes. Any other questions that have come up for anyone on our call? I do see in the chat there are a lot of resources that folks have put out here. So please do take the time to look at the chat. There's Willow House has free support groups. Loss is another support group. The AFSP, we have Healing Conversations. So lots of resources in the chat. So as we're winding down and coming down to the last few minutes, any other thoughts on just hope, on bringing hope for the holidays and hope of getting through the holidays and this time of year? Any other final thoughts that I'd like for each of you to just kind of, any other final thoughts or messages that you have for anyone joining us this evening?
Sure. I think of this as being a very busy time of year, and a lot of the times people just go on automatic, whether it be going on automatic because they feel like they've got to arrange things, or going on automatic because they feel like, well, the holidays are always tough on me. I really encourage people to engage in a level of intention, right? Say, well, this is what I want for this holiday. I worked with somebody who holidays were particularly tough. They were lonely, and they were a person who didn't celebrate Christmas. And I brought this up with them once, and they said, well, because it is a season where a lot of people are together and a lot of people are being spiritual or religious, he wanted to read a text about theology. And so he picked a text that talked about multiple theologies, and that's what he read on Christmas Day. And it wasn't so he could celebrate Christmas. It was so he could engage in a thoughtful thing that day, right? If you have the intention of, painting your house or making your house more of a home, then you use that season in a particular way. If you are a person who celebrates and the holidays are important to you to spend with your friends, well, then you make sure that you call a friend every day. Is just really think about what you want for your holiday so you can go ahead and act on it and make it meaningful for yourself.
I love that. I love that idea. Set the intention. And for you, yes. So make these holidays about you. I love that. And what's going to be meaningful for you. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Sue or Encore?
Go ahead, Sue.
I was just going to add to Edmund's, I don't remember which one of you said before, but a family may have lost a loved one, and each person in the family has a different idea about that, right? Somebody might want a lot of people in the house, and somebody might want no people in the house. So figure out a way for, the immediate family to discuss that, and then make it workable for all of the people. You know, if it's a big party in the house and there's one person who just can't handle that, give them a suggestion of maybe call a friend that you can hang out with at that time at their place maybe. And then you don't have to be, you know, everybody asking you questions. How are you today? How are you doing? How, you know, that you don't want to hear. So I think, you know, again, just every person's different. And if it's a family and it's going to impact everybody, respect everybody's individual wishes.
I love that. So yes, being respectful, but I'm also hearing being mindful, because like you said, everyone is going through their own grief or their own loss in their own way. And so strategizing, I love that. So very helpful, very good suggestion. Thank you for that. All right. And Encore, we go to you.
Yeah, so I want to build off of both of your responses. I love both of them, and I think sometimes Edmund, you said people go on kind of autopilot, right? And we follow the customs, we follow the traditions that we've been told, but this is also a really great time to individualize these traditions, find value in them for yourself, right? A lot of times we're told, okay, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And it loses maybe some of that meaning, some of that purpose. And so it's a good time too to refresh and find for yourself what traditions you might want to keep for yourself, for your family, and which ones maybe don't mean as much to you and that you'd like to change a little bit. And I think that goes too with what Sue was saying in terms of being open and understanding of everybody's kind of individual way of whether it's grief or celebration or something like that, being okay with what each individual in your family or in your group want to do and finding a way to compromise and accommodate.
I love that. And I love what you said about traditions, because I think that's so right. I think we get into this kind of habit of we continue to do these things because of that, because they're called a tradition, but the tradition can change, or it can even become a new tradition, or we don't have to carry on a tradition if it doesn't make sense or if it doesn't hold meaning for us anymore. And that can be okay. So I love that message. Thank you so much. Yes, that it's okay. And however we can get through the holidays is okay. And setting those boundaries, that was a theme that I heard this evening, that setting boundaries is okay, that self-care is so important, planning ahead, definite strategies to get through, and to recognize that if you are struggling, there is help and there's hope available. So excellent discussion, and thank you all so much for spending your evening with us and for being here tonight to talk about a hard and difficult topic, but I think one that definitely needed to be talked about. And if there's nothing else, I think Angela said she's going to email out the resources as well. So I wanted to put that out there. Those will be coming to your email. But I appreciate it all so much for all of you to be here and spend the evening with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
coming.
you.
It was a fabulous discussion. I'm going to work very hard to get this turned around and up on our YouTube channel as quickly as possible, because I think it was really valuable and I'd like to see it there sooner rather than later, so people who may have missed it can log in and watch it. So thank you to all the participants very much for joining. Thanks, everybody. And
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.